So it's my privilege this morning to bring you the good news of God's Word. When we wake up in the morning, we always say good morning and we turn on the news. And a lot of times the news is not good news. So the other night, Ron and I were watching the news, and bad news after bad news after bad news was coming on. And a beautiful story came out of a little boy. And his father was deployed. And when they told him, he's 5 years old, that daddy would be deployed, he just cried and cried and cried, because him and his dad did a lot of yard work together. And at 5 years old, Dad was teaching him how to do yard work, and he was holding the blower and he was trimming bushes. So he cried as Daddy left. And every day he would go out and do yard work. And the neighbor next door would watch this little boy do yard work every day. And he's drinking his coffee and watching, and about a week went by, and it was really pressed on his heart that he needed to help this little boy. So he went out and offered his help. And every day, this neighbor is out there with this little 5-year-old boy doing yard work. They're blowing, they're cutting bushes, because this man felt on his heart that he needed to serve, he needed to connect with this little boy. I thought that was a beautiful story when we hear bad news after bad news. This morning we're going to look at Matthew 10, and in the chapter of Matthew 10 there's a lot of bad news. But at the end of Matthew, we're going to bring some good news to you. So in Matthew 10 we learn that there are hard times, rejection, betrayal, family division, persecution, imprisonment, beatings, hatred, lies, slander, verbal abuse. Sounds familiar, doesn't it, in our time too? So why would anybody sign up for this? Jesus is preparing his disciples to go out and connect with people. I used to know a pastor that would always lean over sometimes when things would get rough, and he would say, if you're going to be a Christian, be one. You know, kind of think about that. If you're going to be a Christian, be one. What is a Christian? So we need to be more of a Christian in our world today. We don't want to be of the world. Right? We don't want to be worldly. We want to be Christians. And so if we are of the world, we really can promise, we're compromising what God is telling us to do. So in Matthew 10, Jesus comes to the end of his message with his disciples, and after warning them repeatedly of the troubles that they would expect, he does what any good leader would do. He encourages them. So in Matthew 10, 40 through 42 is his encouragement to his disciples, to us as Christians, as his believers. So is it a fair question that following Jesus will not win you any praise from the world? Think about that. We don't win any praise from the world when we follow Jesus. We're criticized. We may lose our job. We may be sued. We may be attacked on social media, right? So being a Christian sometimes makes us a little leery. So this morning I want to present how we need to follow Jesus and be sure in our faith and connect with those around us. So it is worth following Jesus. It's not worth keeping our head down and keeping quiet. We need to stand up for what the Bible tells us, what we have learned as Christians to be and to do. So let's study Matthew 10, 40 through 42. This is the Amplified version of the Bible. It says, he who receives and welcomes you receives me. And he who receives me receives him who sent me. He who receives and welcomes a prophet because he is a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And he who receives a righteous, honorable man because he is righteous man will receive a righteous man's reward. And whoever gives to one of these little ones, those who are humble in rank or influence, even a cup of cold water to drink, because he is my disciple, truly I say to you, he will not lose his reward. Okay, now I'm going to be honest. When I read that, it's like, I have to stop and go, okay, welcome you and welcome me, and who's the me and who's the who and where's the... So we're going to look at the message. The message kind of translates it a little bit easier. So on the screen, we have the message. We are intimately linked in this harvest work. Anyone who accepts what you do accepts me. Jesus is talking about him. Anyone who accepts would accept me, Jesus, the one who sent you. Anyone who accepts what I do accepts my Father who sent me. So Jesus is talking about right here that the Father sent Jesus, all right? Accepting a messenger of God is as good as being God's messenger. Accepting someone's help is as good as giving someone help. This is a large work I've called you into, but don't be overwhelmed by it. It's best to start small. Give a cool cup of water to someone who is thirsty, for instance. The smallest act of giving or receiving makes you a true apprentice. You won't lose out on a thing. So in these 3 verses, Jesus is making 3 promises to us, so we're going to dissect that this morning. So promise number 1, in verse 40, is talking about how we connect with people. What I want you to think about is how we are going to connect outside of these walls. Where do you go when you leave here? Some of you go to work. Some of you are involved in your neighborhood outreach. Some of you are involved in book clubs and knitting clubs. And some of you that are still able to play sports are involved in sports. So we have a lot of community outside of these walls, don't we? So this morning I want you to think how we're going to connect other people with God. So verse 40 says, the one who welcomes you welcomes me, and the one who welcomes me welcomes him who sent me. Notice the connection here. First, people welcome you. Second, by welcoming you, they welcome Christ. And third, by welcoming Christ, they welcome the Father. So here's the clearest possible answer to a question that has been raging recently. I really prayed about this if I wanted to even bring this subject up this morning, and God just kept pressing on me as I watched the news and as things kept coming at me this week. Do Christians and Muslims worship the same God? Evidently, some people want to answer yes to that, but that's not true. They want to say that we have Jesus and God, and the Muslims, they have Jesus but not God. That is not true. And so there was a conversation that I had with someone this week that really brought me to dissecting this. And so this is not a true statement that Jesus does not want us to say that. The verse tells us plainly in this verse that the way to the Father is through the Son. Very simple. The way to the Father is through the Son. So there's no debating on that. Jesus said in John 15:23, kind of in a negative sense, that whoever hates me hates my Father as well. And so today, in a multicultural world where we have enshrined tolerance and diversity and pluralism as a new trinity, statements like that don't fit. So non-believers sometimes say to us, there's only one way to God. How dare you say such a thing? We don't get to pick and choose which statements that Jesus tells us. The Bible teaches us clearly and repeatedly that there is only one God, and there's only one way through him, and that's through Jesus Christ. Amen. So in June, we had a huge revival, not the Nazarenes, that was in General Assembly, but here in Phoenix, we had a huge revival. Pastor Greg Laurie came, and he spoke to over 60,000 people, I believe. I know some of you talked about you were going there that Sunday. Did anybody go when Greg Laurie was here at Harvest America? It was held down at the Phoenix Cardinal Stadium. And so Pastor Greg talked about that every road leads to Christ. And so let's think about that. There is not just one road that leads to Christ. There's different roads. We all get there different ways, right? I've had a lot of things happen in my life. So my road maybe took me this way, and maybe we wandered off here and back here, and you're over here. But eventually our roads come back to one road, correct? So I liked how he gave that analogy. And he said, look at John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So here's the good news. When we are connecting people to God, We are preaching that there is only one message, that one road leads to heaven. So as we connect to God, that's very important as we connect others. So our second promise is that we will become a source of blessings to others. So verse 41 tells us, anyone who welcomes a prophet because he is a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And anyone who welcomes a righteous person because he's righteous will receive a righteous person's reward. Unfortunately, we all can't be prophets, and we all can't be preachers. We're missionaries, and we're not all pastors, and we're not all leaders. There's a gentleman who is a great poet, John Milton, and he lost his eyesight. And he penned a sonnet called On His Blindness. And in it, he reflects what it means to lose something very precious to you. And he writes, God does not need man's work or his own gifts. So I thought about that. And as I read further into the poem, his last line says, and I want you to close your eyes as I read the last line. The last line says, they also serve who only stand and wait. So with your eyes closed, I want you to think about, they also serve only those who stand and wait. When you're going into a difficult situation with a family, I know a lot of times pastors can relate to this, but as lay people, you can relate as you're going into a crisis to minister and to grieve with a family. Sometimes we go in there and we think, I'm bringing Jesus in with us, which is great. But you know what? Let's think about, he's already there. He's already there. Jesus is already there where the fires are happening. Yesterday, maybe it was yesterday or Friday, a small plane, some of you might have seen on the news, a small plane crashed on the 405 in Orange County, California, Costa Mesa. And so as soon as I heard that, I have two of my older sons live in that area, they work in that area, and contacted them, and my middle son Terrence said I was about 10 minutes away from it, Mom, and saw it and turned back around, and of course, you know, he was okay. But knowing that God was already there. Think about that. God was already there when you're coming into a situation. So, at any given moment in history, some people come to the forefront. And there are presidents and kings and generals and famous people of all varieties. And even in the Christian world, we have famous people. But not every pastor leads a megachurch. Not every author is world famous, and not every evangelist speaks to a crowded stadium. And Jesus alluded to this when he talked about some that we have one talent, or some of us have 2 talents, or some of us have 5 talents. You can find that in Matthew 25 about the talents. We like to say that the ground is level at the foot of the cross. And in a sense, it's level because we're all coming to the foot of the cross, even though we've all been in different areas, even though we've all experienced different things. The foot of the cross is level for all of us. God isn't obligated to treat me any different than he treats you. There's only one Billy Graham. There's only one Martin Luther. There's only one Pastor Denise. There's only one Ron Delbridge, my husband. Right? We're all the same. You see, the prophets, we saw the prophets, but did we see who were behind supporting the prophets? We see great leaders, but we don't see who stands in the shadows making everything happen. Because someone has to prepare the breakfast, and someone must care for the children, and someone must wait for them at home when they get home, and someone must be there to pick them up at the airport, and someone must sit in the waiting room waiting for them, and someone must quickly go get the PowerPoint that they forgot and needed to go back to the office to grab. Those are the people we don't see. But here's the amazing promise that Jesus makes. Those who stand and wait in the shadows receive the same reward as man or woman who receives all the public acclaim. Did you catch that? So those of us who stand and wait, who are in the wing, will still get the same reward as those who are up in the limelight. You know, we say he won thousands to Christ, but he didn't do it alone. And he built a great church, Pastor Tina. Yeah, but he didn't do it alone. Yeah, but they started 150 churches in Thailand. Yes, but they didn't do it alone. But really, she filled the whole stadium, the stadium with thousands of people as she sang, but she didn't do it alone. And so nothing great is ever done alone. And I want you to remember that. That those who wait, and those who serve, and those who answer emails, those who fold our sheets for iHelp, those who mow the grass, and those who keep the computers running, and those who serve on the task force and the boards, and those who prepare the meals and teach the Sunday school classes, and those who open their homes for Bible studies, and even those who fold up the chairs after we have an event, are all part of the team. You are all part of this team here at Chandler Nazarene. And so in the Christian world, we have many heroes. We have favorite pastors and Bible teachers and singers and Christian actors and musical groups, and there's nothing wrong with having heroes. But those who serve alongside of them get the same reward. So we all can't be prophets, and we all can't win the prophet's reward. But in Jesus' message in chapter 10, we get a stunning final promise. And that's promise number 3. That we will be remembered for the tiniest acts of kindness. So verse 42 tells us, whoever gives just a cup of cold water to one of these little ones because he is a disciple, I assure you, he will never lose his reward. Amen. So we're going to go through this verse. First, we want to look at whoever. There are no limits to this promise. You don't need to be a pastor or a missionary. You don't need to be a professor. You don't need to have a seminary degree. But do you have a cup of cold water? Then you're qualified. You have a cup of cold water. So you are all qualified. Second, we're going to look at the recipient, which is one of these little ones. In context, Jesus is talking about the least among his followers. Jesus was no front runner. There are little ones everywhere. So if you're reaching out to the hurting, to the forgotten, the poor, the homeless, to the abused, to the woman who's been trapped in sex trafficking, to the prisoner, to the Somali immigrant, to a widow, to an orphan, to a place called Seed of Hope in South Africa, Jesus sees your concern for the people. And the world can't see that, but Jesus sees it. Third, we're going to look at the action. When you're giving a cup of cold water, it's simple, it's inexpensive, and it goes often unseen. It requires very little preparation. Sometimes a cup of cold water may contain a sea of warm love. Think about that, giving someone just something so simple. And we use the cup of cold water as an example. It could be a hug. It could be a phone call. Number 4, look at the certainty of the reward. It says in that verse, I assure you. I assure you. For most of us, like I said, that cup of cold water is not a big deal. If we are thirsty, we go to the faucet, we turn it on, we fill it up, we want it cold, we put some ice in it, we're good to go. But many parts of the world, clean water is a rare treat. If we think about the outside communities, sometimes that's a rare treat, is to get a cup of cold water, for someone to notice them, for someone to care about them. You see, we may forget these little things that we do, but Jesus does not forget. You may be thinking nothing of it, but Jesus remembers it forever. In Matthew 25, verses 34 through 39, Jesus says this in a different way. Come, You were blessed by my Father. Inherit the kingdom, prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or without clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? What kind of question is that? I mean, if you fed Jesus, you would remember it. If you gave him clothes, wouldn't you remember it? If you visited him in prison, wouldn't you remember it? But they didn't. Sometimes we don't when we are doing things outward for our community. So Jesus explains to them in verse 40 of Matthew 25, he says, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. So when we go in his name, he goes with us. We know we are going with him and for him. But we now know we are also going to him. So on the receiving end of the mercy transaction, he is there in the face of the Afghan refugee. He stands with the homeless on Harlem Avenue exit, or right down here on Chandler Boulevard. He sees the struggling mother with 3 children. He has a cell inside of every prison in this world. He walks the halls of cancer units in every hospital. He hears the cries of abused children. He is there in the assembly of believers. He is here. He is out there where others are assembling in the name of Jesus, and he's everywhere. He hears the cries of our cries, and he looks at the debris-filled streets of Ecuador. He sees the war-torn country of Syria, and he's right there where our forest fires are happening. You see, there's a sense in which the Lord Jesus can be found everywhere through our human pain and suffering. If there is a broken heart, you can find him. He's there. I want to ask you, where 2 or 3 are gathered, what's the end of that verse? Where 2 or 3 are gathered, I am there in the midst of them. Matthew 18:20. So Jesus tells us, where 2 or 3 are gathered, there I am in the midst of them. So when we help people, we're helping him. When we dry a tear, we're helping him. We go the extra mile, even though we're tired and it's been one of those days and we're frustrated and we don't have the time and the energy and we're already behind schedule, but we do it anyway. He sees it and he knows what we've done. He marks that down as we've done it to him personally. Have you thought of that? When we go out of our way to help somebody else, he marks that down as we are doing it for him personally, because we are his children. We are his. So let's quickly review what we've talked about. Promise number 1 is we will connect people with God. Promise number 2 is we will become a source of blessings to others. And promise number 3 is we will be remembered for the tiniest acts of kindness. So we give someone a cup of cold water. He doesn't forget. We give a friend a bag of chips. We pat someone on the back. We give someone a hug. We call someone for a few minutes of conversation. We visit a sick friend. You know, sometimes we do those in habit and we don't think about it. God never forgets. I heard a former baseball player, Darryl Strawberry, share his testimony. And in his career, he hit over 335 home runs. He was named to the All-Star team 8 times, and he was a 4-time World Series champion. But along the way, he won notoriety for his well-documented and repeated struggles with alcohol and drugs. So he spoke about his many weaknesses and his failures, but he never blamed anyone but himself. So when he finally surrendered his life to Christ, he was transformed into a new man. And near the end of his talk, he summarized his whole career this way. When I get to the end of my life, God's not going to ask me, "Hey, Daryl, how many grand slams did you hit?" He's going to ask me, "What did you do for my kingdom?" He's exactly right. And so champions and rewards and rings and titles and money and status and connections aren't going to mean anything, right? When we stand before the Lord, a cup of cold water that we gave a thirsty child or a teenager or a man or a woman is going to matter more than home runs, big old title rings, how much money we have in our bank accounts. So we need to be faithful. We are called to be faithful in doing whatever God gives us to do. And so sometimes it will be little things, and sometimes it's going to be big things. But the Lord will see it all, no matter what he gives us. So it all comes down to this. How are we going to serve Jesus?